So we're talking about good and bad arcade ports. When we started talking about this show, it just kind of took me back because back in the day, arcades were the place to be, man. It's like everybody, all the kids in the neighborhood, they all hung out in the arcade. It was, I miss it. I really do. To this day, I miss it. But then we had the rise of home consoles coming out, and then this little thing called arcade ports became a buzzword. Play the arcade at home. Yeah, I remember begging my parents to like buy me certain games. I'm like, well, if you buy me this game, I could be here at home and I don't have to go to the arcade anymore. That was such a lie.
Oh yeah, you're still going to the arcade. Just find
I,
something else to play.
I still spent so much time in the arcade. So yeah, the rise of the arcade ports, man. Some were good, some not so good. So
I wonder when that started. I wonder what like the first game was. Where like get the arcade experience at home. I wonder who the first people to do that were. Because then after that, everybody was doing that. Every for generations. That's all they talk. Oh, bring the arcade experience home.
that was it. That was the tagline. The arcade experience at home. Play it in the comfort of your own home. Relive the arcade in your home.
To be fair,
So
most of the time it was never the same.
it,
Most of the time,
I don't know, man. I think we got a pretty decent list going on. So
there's some good
with
ones.
with that being said, what's the first game that comes to your mind when we say arcade ports?
I mean, for me, it's
Good ones.
probably NBA Jam for the Sega Genesis specifically. SNES was fine too, I guess, but I had the Genesis version. I played the living hell out of that game, man. I had the tournament edition one.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it it was pretty close to the arcade. It's not going to be like pixel perfect. It's not going to look as good as the arcade did, but it was damn good on the Genesis, man.
It played. You know what? Like you said, it didn't look as great as the arcade, but it played just like the arcade.
It did. There was like obviously you don't have a joystick. Well, maybe they had like a joystick controller you could have bought, but like just using the D-pad worked out perfectly fine. Perfectly fine.
Sound effects were there.
He's
You
on
know.
fire.
Yeah, from downtown.
He's heating up.
They were. It was all of it was there. That yes, I agree. That's one I think about when we talk about good arcade ports. NBA Jam is at the top, atop of the list. That was
Yeah,
great.
they make those arcade one-up machines that are like smaller versions of arcade
Mhm.
machines. There's a lot of different ones. There's only a handful I would have ever. I don't have any, but there's only a handful I would have ever paid money for, and NBA Jam is certainly towards the top of that list.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, the original and tournament. But then when they kind of got into like the 3D ones,
Yeah.
it kind of lost its luster. Hang Time tried to recapture some of it, and it played just like NBA Jam, but it wasn't NBA Jam.
Yeah, they tried a few times to like bring that back. I think they even during the PS3 360 era there was a version they brought back, but I don't think
Yep.
it did. I don't think it did like phenomenally well or anything like that.
No, because I remember seeing it in the arcade. It was always quarters lined up to play, always a crowd around watching, and then we got it at home. And I can honestly say I think we got really close to the arcade version at home.
Make me want to go play it right now.
It's good stuff, man. My son plays it to this day. When his friend comes over, he plays it.
My only complaint is that damn rubber banding AI, man. If you're playing against the computer, dude, that thing comes back like you could be dominating, like smashing, and by halftime you're just killing the computer. And then by the end of the game, you're lucky if you win by like 2 points. That AI comes back something fierce in that game, man.
I agree. It does. It really does.
Now, Wes, out of all the games we've ever talked about, this is surely at the top of your list. Maybe it's not number one, but yeah, it's got to be in your top five without a doubt. And I mean this really brought fighting games to the forefront.
Mhm.
And if you guys know anything about fighting games, of course we're talking about what?
Street Fighter 2.
Street Fighter 2. Not the first one.
No, definitely not the first one. The second one. The good one.
So
The
when we're
good
talking
one.
about the ports, there was obviously the most popular one was going to be the Super Nintendo one, and then there was there's some different versions. They have what Turbo, and
Mm-hmm.
then on Genesis you have like Champion Edition. It didn't matter which one you had, honestly. They were all very good ports, very good different versions of Street Fighter.
Oh man, I remember when playing in the arcade Street Fighter Two again. Another people were lined up to play the next match to play the winner. And when Nintendo announced that they were releasing Street Fighter Two for the Super Nintendo, okay, there was that tagline. Live the arcade experience at home. Man, it was close. It was really good. It was really good.
Yeah, it was great. I don't have any complaints about the home version. I mean, yeah, I think same thing kind of to the last David. It's going to look better in the arcade, but it
Mm-hmm.
played perfect on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis.
The Super Nintendo one looked. I really want to say it looked almost identical to the arcade. It was really close.
Super
Yeah.
Nintendo definitely looked a little bit better than Genesis. Obviously it played a little bit better just by having that 4 button controller layout was better than the 3 button, which I know Genesis would later release the 6 button, but I don't know. SNES has a win in this column, I think.
I don't know, man. But when Sega, because for the longest time, Sega didn't have Street Fighter Two. It was just Super Nintendo. So all the Nintendo fans were like, laughing at the Genesis guys, but then Sega released that 6 button controller, and everybody was wondering what it was for, and they said Street Fighter Two Champion Edition. That was it right there, man. 6 button layout. Oh, heck yeah, man! It's all in. Granted, color palette wasn't as nice as the Super Nintendo one. It was missing a little bit of frames of animation, but at the end of the day, it was still Street Fighter, and it was a pretty good port, man.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with any of those versions. You know, this is when Capcom's. I mean, they still kind of do some crazy shit with the different versions of their games. But I mean, how many different versions of Street Fighter Two did they make? Like 17 over the course of like a decade or two.
A bunch, a bunch.
It's crazy. But I mean, it's probably the best fighting game of all time. I can't think of one that's better than Street Fighter Two.
No,
There's some that come close, but I mean,
I
Street
mean,
Fighter Two is like
yeah, there's a bunch of other fighters out there that are really, really good, but Street Fighter Two, I think, is like legendary at this point. And
certain.
every time Capcom released a new version of Street Fighter in the arcade, it came home.
Yep.
It came home.
Next up is I mean I was so big into Ninja Turtles that I getting that NES title, that first one, I was so excited. Man, did I not like that game. I forced myself to play it. It was not the best. I understand it's not like a terrible game. It's hard, dude. It's really hard, especially for kids. You would think they would like kind of go a little easier on you.
Nope.
No. So I was not a big fan of that TMNT game. But then they made the arcade game. Of course, we played it in the arcade first.
Mhm.
It was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Ported it to NES. Very good port. Especially for the NES. Very good port. And then they made Turtles in Time. And they ported that to the SNES. And I mean, this thing was like, I didn't have an SNES growing up, but my neighbor did, and I played over his house all the time. Like 2 games we played all the time was Super Mario World and TMNT Turtles in Time. It was
Turtles in Time.
constantly on, man. Played it in the arcade. Just I love it. Love Turtles in Time. One of the best beat 'em ups of all time. You can't deny it, Wes.
I can't deny it. It was great. It was really good. Especially was we're talking about arcade ports. It was almost identical. It really was a good port, man. I don't think anything was missing from what I can remember because I haven't touched Turtles in Time in a while. Actually, though, it is on the Cowabunga collection. I may go back and revisit that.
Yeah, I think the Cowabunga collection has both versions. I want to say I think it has
Yep.
the arcade version and the SNES version on there as well.
Yes, it does. So I may go back and compare. But it was good. It was really, really, really good. And this unfortunately the Genesis didn't get Turtles in Time.
Yeah, we got Hyperstone Heist was I supposed to be pretty good. I never played Hyperstone Heist, unfortunately, but I heard it was Not as good as Turtles in Time, but like pretty close.
You know what? In the beginning, it felt like it was the same thing. I'm like, this is the same exact game, but then at some point, it deviates and kind of goes as its own thing. But
Well, that's cool. I mean, if you own both systems back then, you got two different beat 'em ups.
yeah, it was Konami. Konami's home ports were pretty spot on, even though they didn't give us the Simpsons and X-Men back then. They did give us Turtles. So
Yeah, Konami was very competent at making different ports. Like Contra on
mhm.
NES was not an exact replica of Contra at the arcade, but it was a great game. Like they did a really good version for the NES.
Oh, without a doubt, yes, it was.